Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Hello and welcome to another podcast of Harvesting Wisdom. I'm your host, Mike McMahon. Today, my guest is Aubrey Aquino. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, Aubrey. Our mission with Harvesting Wisdom is to tell the stories of individuals and organizations that embrace sustainability, environmental regenerative agriculture, land management, and we see all those as a cornerstone for a thriving planet, ensuring prosperity and health for generations to come. So welcome, Aubrey, to the show. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be on the show, Mike. And you got my name right, so no worries there.
Okay, great. I usually mess the names up, and half the times I mispronounce words too, and that's kind of my forte is bastardizing the English language, I guess. But I'm going to give a little brief bio of you for the listeners. Sure. Your current position is executive producer and host of California Bountiful. Your experiences in the past and your history is, I'm going to hopefully highlight the good stuff here. You hosted shows in San Francisco Bay, Sacramento, Southern Virginia, Miami. You just told me before we started the podcast that you were here in Arizona for a few years, working for Channel 12, I guess. So you've got a diverse media resume, and you've got credits at iHeartMedia. You were a Comcast newsmaker, E! News, CNN, the NFL Network, interviewed celebrities. And I'm not even going to repeat all the celebrities you did because you have quite a long list of them. But your education was a bachelor's in broadcast journalism at San Jose University.
Yeah.
So did I pretty much cover all the stuff that will be read at your funeral someday in 50 years?
You sure did.
Okay, great. So you got all this. You started in college. You wanted to be in broadcasting. Tell all those other people who may have those same dreams, how's the journey been? And
it's probably a much different journey these days. Not to date myself, but from when I was getting into the business. But I think, it all stems from, I'm one of those people who's always kind of wants to be in the know and get all the information and always has questions. And so naturally, I just kind of became this dot connector, whether it be, connecting my friends and families with information and resources, but also just this interest in storytelling and sharing information. And I think obviously that really lends yourself in a medium like broadcast where you're telling stories, you're sharing information. And so that's just kind of the path I went down, and didn't traditionally start in the agriculture space, but that's where I've landed now. But yeah, as you mentioned, I've kind of moved around the country, and that's typically what people do when they're in a television or a radio career. And it's great though, because I'm born and raised in the Bay Area, and I've had the opportunity to live in different areas of the country, live in different metro areas, which, you kind of grow up in your bubble and then you move outside and you see all these different things. And along the way, I have done the whole range of stories, from gloom and doom news to red carpets, entertainment, sports, but always weaved in there. There's always stories about food, because food is like that one great connector. And so it's awesome that I've had the opportunity to land at the California Farm Bureau now, and producing and hosting a show called California Bountiful, which is all about the lifestyle of ag in the Golden State.
Wow. So we'll get into that in a second. But so when you're in journalism, though, you really don't have a choice necessarily of what you're covering, right? And so the idea of moving into something that's impactful for other people, that's got to feel pretty good for you.
Oh, absolutely. I think the ability to use my skills as a producer and as a host and telling stories, but telling stories in a specific space. And when it comes to a topic like agriculture, I mean, it affects every single person, every single living person that's on the planet. You can almost relate anything to agriculture. And like I said,
Yeah.
even though I didn't grow up on a farm, I'm not a farmer, but I'm a consumer and I care and I eat and I wear clothes. So it's
Yeah.
great to know the stories behind all of these commodities and products and things that we all consume. And I don't know if it's just me getting older, maybe me being a mom, maybe a side effect of the pandemic, but there is such this interest, and people just crave knowledge more so, I think, than ever before, of where did my food come from, or what are the stories behind that apple, that orange, and who's growing it. And there's so many stories out there, it's limitless. So even though I am covering one genre, I mean, I am not at a shortage for story ideas because there are so many stories to tell.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'd know that because I'm in the middle of writing 5 different books that are related that
Five
probably
books,
will
that's it.
that will never get read. Well, I put one down and I go back to it in 3 or 4 months and I'm, oh my God, this is horrible. I got to change it all or whatever. But it's part of a learning process, right? And I mean that's kind of the name. That's how we named our podcast, is Harvesting Wisdom. And it's a matter of, and it's weird because Harvesting Wisdom. Sometimes we interview people who are very young in high school or in college or just graduated. I have a couple of guys who work for me that have aerospace engineering degrees and
Ooh.
mechanical engineering degrees, and they know things that I don't know, and things, because it really is a different
Mhm.
world every 6 years. That each generation brings something else to the table, but and then some of the guests I've had on here are in their 90s or in their 80s, and some of them are still very active in their mid 70s. So the idea is to bring out these various stories. So as we move forward, let's talk about what is California Bountiful exactly, and tell me the difference between. I kind of have learned it, not that I ever wanted to do this, but I know what the difference is from a producer to a host somewhat. But why don't you,
Mhm.
because you have the both positions, right?
Right.
And I've got Dr. Joe Rozelle is the producer of this show. Only because there's no way I want to do that. That's like so much work. And then I was told by our podcast studio manager that I'm the talent. I'm kind of a talentless talent, and that's the host, right? So
Right.
all I really do is ask questions, but it's the reason I think we started this is because I did want to know about things that were going on the planet, and everybody's got a different life journey, and how does this all relate to what this world that we're living in, right? And so I'm doing something kind of similar to what you're doing. You're just doing it on a larger budget and a better format,
I don't know about
probably.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
We have a
So
decent budget. We have a good budget because we want to produce a quality show. But like, to answer your first question, what is California Bountiful? So California Bountiful is a weekly 30-minute lifestyle program, and it's put out by the California Farm Bureau. And pretty much every state has a farm bureau. So what is the Farm Bureau? It's a
sure,
membership organization where farmers, farm supporters, and advocates belong to the Farm Bureau. And so this show was created basically in the communications marketing department to tell the stories of farmers and ranchers and to really educate all consumers. Sometimes people will be like, well, that's the farm show. And yeah, we have lots of farms and we talk about farmers, but it's not just for farmers. It's, if anything, it's really for anybody who eats or wears clothes. So it's about connecting, the rural with the urban, and just telling all the stories from a lifestyle perspective. And so that's part of what makes it a lot of fun because, as I said, I'm not a farmer. I was born and raised in San Jose, California. And back in the day, again, not dating myself, there were a lot of farms and dairies. I remember when I was, very young, and now it's turned into the Silicon Valley. But, back in the day, there were tons of orchards, vineyards, and things like that. And so I grew up around it. We just didn't have a farm per se. Funny now because my dad has retired and does have his own farm. But anyway, Um, so California Bountiful tells all these great stories, and my role as the host is I'm not trying to be an expert. I don't know everything about agriculture, but I am learning with the audience as I take them, around the state of California and tell these stories. And it's really awesome because I get to use my own curiosity to drive the show, to drive the stories, and I'm learning along with the audience. So, by no means am I any expert, but I'm learning a lot. And there are so many common themes that I'm seeing these days when it comes to, farm to fork, farm to table, sustainability, organic, regenerative. I mean, there's so many words and there's so much of a collective effort to really do right by the earth, by the planet. And then there's those old school farmers, sixth, seventh generation farmers, but or families that have been on their farms, but maybe the new generations kind of have a little bit different ideas of how to move forward that was different from their great grandparents. And so there is so much innovation as well. You were talking about things change every so many years, and that's true in farming and agriculture as well. So it's a lot of fun because I get to meet lots of people, and our stories, they go the whole range. There may be times when I'm on a farm, there may be times when I'm in a like a high-end restaurant with a Michelin star chef cooking up a meal, showing us how he sources, showing us how we can consume that food and how we can use it. So it's a lot of fun. And I think, in my role as host, obviously I kind of get to be the face and ask all the questions and take people on these journeys. But I also do enjoy being producing. And I think the producer side, at least for me, is more of, finding those unique angles that I feel are going to resonate with the audience. And then, of course, all the administrative setting things up and how are we going to order it and how are we going to make it make sense? Because at the end of the day, I want it to be engaging and appealing for the viewers that we're creating it for. And I really enjoy it. Maybe it's a little bit of a control freak in me, but I really want to have that ownership and be passionate, not only in my craft of putting stories together, but also the content and the subject matter, because it is so important. And again, it's something that crosses all demographics, no matter how old, how young, cultural background, political beliefs. I mean, whatever, everybody is an agriculture consumer.
Yeah, and it is crazy because we're kind of leading a similar path as we're self-educating, but it's out of curiosity, right? And each time
Yeah.
you learn more. So tell me about your profile of the people you're spotlighting. Are they everywhere from CCOF is California Organic Certified Farmer, right? So
Mhm.
that would be considered alternative farming compared to what we would call industrial farming or commercial farming, which is the majority of farming on the planet.
Right.
Do you kind of profile different groups like big farmers doing 10, 20,000 acres, and at the same time profile some of the smaller people doing, maybe a small home farm?
Yes, we definitely do. As I mentioned, the Farm Bureau is a membership organization. So obviously we want to spotlight our members. But I think, and this is probably a trend across the board, is that, some of these associations, traditionally, they have a certain, when it came to the farmers, it had a lot of these legacy farmers. But as we're seeing, and I'm sure you've picked up on as you've been doing your podcast and just in your various business ventures, there's all kinds of new ways to farm and new people jumping in the mix that aren't necessarily from that old school or, have that generational farm passed down. So I do cover the whole gamut because, yeah, there's these great big brands, these great big farms that, maybe have more of like a traditional industrial method. But then you do have the small farmers. You do have, what are they called? Homesteaders, urban farming. So I try to get them all in there because there's not a one size fits all.
No.
And I've also discovered that when it comes to farming, there's so many different ways that, it may work for one farmer to do it this way, may work for another farmer to do it that way. But the one thing, the common thread I find in everyone I talk to, I mean, farmers, people in agriculture are extremely passionate and extremely smart. And I just didn't realize, all the science that
Oh
really
God,
goes
yeah,
into it and the
yeah,
research. I mean, I know it was there, but when I'm talking to them in an interview, sometimes I'm like, whoa, 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 we've got to keep this high level because for our audience, they're not going
yeah.
to
You,
understand
you
all the
can lose it.
nuance.
Sure,
But
sure.
we want to, at least give it to them in a way that they can digest. And then if they want to learn more, they can go to your website and whatnot. But yeah, so it's been great because I've gone to these places, people who are incredibly proud and they can pinpoint when their ancestors got to California and established their cattle ranch, or even people who are like, hey, I don't have a farming background, but I wanted to do this and I bought this apple orchard in Mariposa, on the footsteps of Yosemite, and now we're making apple cider. And they were city slickers before that, living in New York City. So
Yeah,
it's a
gentleman
lot of fun.
farmers they call them, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and it seems like that's what I've known so many successful people, and in their later career they give up whatever it was that the daily grind, and now they own a
Mhm.
vineyard, and they always
Yeah.
had a passion for wine and growing grapes and that. And you're right. It's such an interesting journey because everything is kind of connected to it, right? So
Mhm.
when you go to a grocery store, did it change what grocery store do you go to, or do you go to farmers markets? Are you eating organic products now, or grass fed beef, or I mean, all these things are kind of related, and so how does that resonated with you personally? I mean, from a standpoint of now you're looking at a restaurant completely different, for instance, than or the grocery aisle. So
You're
how has it
right.
changed?
I am more aware because obviously, representing the California Farm Bureau, and we have so many commodities here. And I think it's not like I didn't know, but being a native Californian, when you think of a farm or farmers, you think, oh, that's in the Midwest. But honestly, California is such a huge agricultural state, and we have like something like 400 or 500 different things that are grown. So by far, we have so many different commodities. But yeah, so there's more of this awareness of like, where did this come from? Because I'm meeting people. So I don't know if they have these in Arizona, but it's called a sumo citrus, right?
Uh-huh.
It's this like overgrown mandarin that has a top knot, super sweet. It peels clean. It's still relatively new to the market. And so I think, they've kind of started targeting some places in California. So I don't know how far it's gone out yet. But yeah, I tried it and I was hooked. And so now when I go to the grocery store, I'm like, hey, I know where that citrus, I know the story behind
Isn't
that
it
citrus.
crazy how you just take a deep dive into a commodity?
Yeah.
We do a lot of work with hemp, and we produce and propagate hemp seed and grow the hemp out for biomass. And
Cool.
biomass is heard for insulation or construction materials, but it's also creates fabric similar to a linen.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so versatile. Plus, the seed off of it is one of the most nutritious things you can eat. So just
Oh.
this is just one commodity, but the commodity also remediates the land. So it's got deeper roots, and it allows it's kind of a natural tillage. And when it's being grown, it can get 25, 26 feet tall. But
Whoa.
when you talk about California, because we partner with a guy in California, and we do a lot of growing over there, and especially with the
Mhm.
hemp, and he decorticates it off of old cotton gins and that kind of thing.
Oh.
And his name is Tom, and he's in that Fresno area, right? And that
Mhm.
Fresno
Central
triangle
Valley.
there. Well, what's interesting, and I don't know the statistics, but I think California is the leading state for agriculture. And if you
Yes.
think about it, great soil, and it's year-round good climate, right? Whereas
Mhm.
when we traditionally think Midwest as being the breadbasket, at this point the Midwest grows. They select a crop because they can only grow it for a short period of time during the year, unless a lot of them have gone to monoculture, growing just wheat or just
Mhm.
growing corn, which is the prevalent crop, I guess. So it is interesting. I guess if I was going to pick a farm bureau to be involved with, California might be the one. Arizona, we're good, but we do have a real hot summer period,
Yeah.
which makes things a little more prohibitive. But
I heard
so,
agave is going to be the new crop coming up. So that
that's
Arizona
the
might be good for agave.
that's the name of my construction company. Arizona is good
Oh,
for
oh,
agave.
it's right there, huh?
Yeah. So it's actually really good in the southern part of Arizona. Is there's a little bit higher elevation, so I
Okay.
think agave would be a great place to grow that crop. And again, agave is. I like tequila. Do you like tequila?
I've been known to enjoy a margarita.
There you go. So it is interesting to follow a commodity because that is a excuse me, that's a very important crop in Mexico. And that, it's amazing how an entire communities can revolve and surround or survive around a specific crop like that, right? And just name it. It can be wine, it can be a crop that produces alcohol, it can be meats, it can be pretty much anything. Now, have you, at the California Wine Farm Bureau, have you gone to dairies and chicken houses and any of the animal husbandry?
I haven't gone to a chicken house. I mean, I've been to chicken coops, but more of kind of like
Small
on an
scale.
agritourism level, not so much
Okay.
where like a poultry farm. But that is on my list. But yeah, I've been to some dairies. Obviously, dairy, another big, all our California cheeses and ice cream, of course. One of my
Right.
favorite things, and milk. So I have been to those. Been to some cattle ranches. More, obviously that's more so in the northern part of the state. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that's one of my challenges as I've stepped into this role is there's so many things I want to do and I need to pace
Well, that
myself. So
makes
we're
you
a weekly
perfect. It
show,
makes you
but I don't
perfect for the role, though, right? Because
right, but I don't
if you
partic
came in with a bias, it would be different. You're coming in and you're saying, "Wow,"
yeah.
and your curiosity is what people see in the show.
Yeah, and then every time I go somewhere, that probably spawns, two or three more ideas because they'll be like, "Hey, you ought to go talk to this guy who's there doing this," and it really is kind of building those relationships with the farmers. Like I said, they're so passionate, so they're so eager to share
Sure.
even the things that they're finding unique, and the only way to truly know about everything is to be with the people and get the input from them because California also being such a big state, it's not easy to know everything that's going on. I mean, all the way to the south to San Diego to the north. I actually went to Alturas. I don't know if you've ever heard of Alturas, but like people go through Alturas like on the way to Burning Man. So when you're in
Okay.
Alturas, you can see it's Modoc, the Modoc National Forest. You can see to the North Oregon and to the East Nevada. And it was just like, whoa, I'm out here. And I went out there to do a story about wild horses, which, again, even though I'm from California, I'm like, that was kind of mind blowing. Like, we have wild horses in California. Yeah,
Yeah.
we
Where do you
do.
go
And
find them?
they're there because of agriculture, and they were brought there for agricultural purposes, many years ago. So
Yeah, we see
it's a big state
donkeys.
to
We
cover.
see donkeys around Lake Pleasant, and they were used in mining, and
Yeah,
they
and
still
so
are
and
there.
those are the stories I love to tell. Some of those historical stories are great too. So on the one hand, there's the history, then there's the innovation. I went to a indoor vertical farm that in all places
Ah.
in Compton, California, right there in
Oh, I
LA.
have to go. My daughter
And
went to USC. I'll have to go and visit that.
oh,
She's
if
no
you're
longer
familiar,
there,
yeah.
but you know.
Yeah, the company was called Plenty, and I think like Whole Foods carries they do leafy greens, but they're all being grown vertically and with
Uh-huh.
no sun and soil. But I mean, it's still farming, and it may not agree with traditional farmers, but hey,
So are
it
they
looks like a viable solution for urban areas.
so now I shouldn't divert, but um,
Yeah,
does it rotate the wall so it goes up like a
yeah,
blind and
there's a
down
lot
the
of
other side?
robotics involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just kind of slide in and then they line them up and then they have lights and they can control, what times of day they get light and obviously the
Right.
amount of nutrients and water. It's really fascinating. And, I think agriculture is a space for everybody, to do it the
Yeah.
way that works for them. And at the end of the day, we're trying to feed the planet.
Exactly. And
And that's a
sustainably.
tall order.
Right.
Yeah,
And to do it
sustainably, right?
sustainably
And
without doing
maintaining the
damage.
planet and
Right.
so it's fun to tell those stories because again, I find it interesting and if it's something I'm going to Google, chances are someone else is Googling it too. So let's do a story on it.
Yeah. So you've got you're traveling all over the state, following
Hmm.
different stories, and I mean, that's a perfect example of, internally. There's a lot of plants that are now being grown, whether they're tomatoes in hothouses or a vertical farm or farms for fodder, which is to feed animals.
Hmm.
Of course, the marijuana industry does a lot of indoor growing, and
Yeah,
strange as that is, no matter how you think on marijuana, that's advanced agriculture quite a bit because it's a
it is.
very specific crop. It has to have a certain taste profile and a certain THC content and what that does to you. And a lot of people who are growing it. I have a friend who is doing it on a pretty large scale, but he's only doing it for medical purposes. And his idea is to
Mhm.
replace opioids, in
Wow.
hospitals with that
Hmm.
stuff. So it's there's so many different crop stories. They're commodity stories and I don't know if you've ever read. There's a guy Kurlinski. Have you ever read any of his books?
No, I haven't.
All right, I'm going into geek space here, but Kurlinski
High
wrote
level,
a.
keep it high level, Mike.
Yeah, this is high level. He wrote a full book on salt. So it's the history of salt through the history of humanity, right? Starts with salt. He
Mm,
wrote one on cod, then he wrote one on paper, then he wrote another one on milk. So they're
interesting.
actually enjoyable books to read. The next time you're stuck in an airplane for 10 hours, pick it up and I think you'll find it. But especially as you're, developing that curiosity, which I've done as well, it just gives you a different perspective. It's like, really, this is how this whole thing is working. This is what's tying the world together. Whether it's people in jobs or that are based on agriculture, or it's you eating. Right. That's a big
Hmm.
part of it. So, with your podcast now, have you gotten any direction to try to show issues that are in agriculture, or that's more story based? Like, so for instance, you got this extreme group of people who believe everything has to be organic and sustainable and all these things, then a different group that's believing in this industrial farming practices. And what I've found, originally going in with more of a bias for the organic, now
Hmm.
I have to question some of that because you know, right now only 1 or 2% of our population is involved with, agriculture. So if you think about it, 100, 200, 150 years ago, 80% of us were. And people would
Right.
work from sun up to sundown and, deal with the heat and the cold and the dirt and everything else. And it was back breaking labor, right? So that doesn't happen anymore. As a society, we don't deal with that because of the industrial age, and so that's you can take that same position when it comes to GMOs, which can produce a better yield or a better crop, a better tasting product, but also one in which you don't have the same problems with fungus or insects, so you're not spraying the ground as much, right? So
Right.
the other side of that coin is kind of that extreme. What I'm seeing is I've interviewed lots of farmers and a lot of PhDs from the universities, whether they're agronomists or soil scientists or they're seed people. What I see is that there's no, like you said, there's no one size fits all. There's a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions. But what I believe that what's good for the planet and good for everyone is kind of this merge toward the middle a little bit, where we take care of
Hmm.
soil health and we're sustainable. No farmer out there wants to waste chemicals on his or her property, right? So that's what I see with it. But do you profile more of the stories of each of these farmers, or do you get into to that deep dive on the hard issues?
Well, there's no doubt that in California, the farmers have a lot of challenges. You'll hear a lot about water, just a lot of the regulations when it comes to things like, how are they treating the soil? What are they putting on the crops? California has very high standards, and it's expensive, right? It's expensive to be a farmer
Sure.
in California for sure. Um, my show, we're on lifestyle, we don't want any controversy, but,
Right.
but at the same time, that's, you kind of weave it in there, right? So maybe we're
Sure.
not talking about like a drought, but we're, maybe in the course of interviewing a farmer, he's telling me how he's adapted his crop or how he's chosen what he was going to grow this year based on the water, or maybe they installed a kind of drip system, or they've devised ways to adapt to the challenges. So there's ways to talk about the issues, but not exactly get into the
Getting
nitty
people,
gritty and make
getting bomb threats and
controversial.
stuff. Right. Sure.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But no doubt there's you can't talk about agriculture without those things coming up. But I think that's also good, because then you see the creativity and just kind of the nimbleness of how
Oh,
farmers
sure.
have adapted to change. And it's like the one year we were dealing with extreme drought, the next year we had so much water, then we're dealing with flood and losing crops because they're getting rained out. And then there's water storage and all those sorts of things. And at the Farm Bureau they do deal with those issues, but in my department, yeah, I'm just able to tell the stories, and
Sure. Well,
I
it's
want
it.
people to walk away feeling like they're learning something and feel a little bit more connected. One of the things I always say is, when people ask me like, why do you do the show, or like, what is it really about? It's like, if you were asked to ask a child, hey, where did you get that apple from? And they're like, oh, we got it at the grocery store.
Ah,
But it's like, actually, that didn't come from the grocery store. Yeah,
right.
you might have bought it at the grocery store, but there was a big story from, when the seed was planted, to who grew it, to who harvested it, who transported it, and all the way down the line to, if it's a prepared food. So, um, there's a lot of things in between to tell. And I think it's great to be able to connect people of all ages, because they are curious, and there's a lot of people who are just into want to grow their own things now too, because there is this more heightened awareness when we talk about sustainability, food
Sure.
waste, organic. One story I also tell a lot is, we love avocados. I guess we're Californians, we love avocados. So I have
Uh-huh.
two sons,
It's the only place in the
and
country you can grow them.
yeah, and then my son. So I was making him avocado toast, and he says, before I'm cutting avocado, he's like, "Wait, mom, are those California avocados? I only like California avocados. I don't want avocados from somewhere else." And I had gotten the avocados from Costco, so I had to go back and look at the label. But it was just funny. I think it's like trickling down to my kids, because they're like, "Yeah, mom's always looking at all the different produce and things."
Sure. That's funny because the my partner, my ex-partner in my landscape company was an avocado farmer in Escondido. And
Mhm. Oh yeah, lots of
and
avocados there.
his bias was that California avocados were the best. Um,
They are.
and they are. And I'd have to say he's probably now. If you went down to places in Mexico or South America, you're going to
Mhm.
find beautiful, wonderful avocados. Don't get me wrong, but
Oh yeah,
they're not necessarily the ones that get shipped up here. So
right.
I'll put a plug in for avocados from California all day long. They're
I,
bigger, they
I'm
taste
planning
better.
to go down to San Diego and do some avocado stories, because
Sure.
I love avocados.
Avocado Highway. It's Escondido. It's along
I
the
can't
15.
wait.
Yeah,
I think like a couple years ago there was like either it was an avocado shortage or the prices shot up, but I was like, oh, I can't give up my avocados. I don't care how much the avocados cost.
exactly. And well, I think that's part of a transition too for people in general. If you want high quality from a nutrition
Hmm.
standpoint or taste, then you do have to pay attention because there are farmers out there that have to go in that extra mile to create something or to grow something, and it's more costly to grow some things that way. And I don't know. I look at California as being agricultural leaders. I mean, UC Davis is an incredible school. I mean, Cal
Yeah,
Poly,
Cal
all
Poly
these.
Slow,
Right.
Chico, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of and it's a year-round endeavor in California, right? Perfect climate.
Hmm.
Um, the soils are generally pretty good, and so because of that, a lot of things are grown there that can't just grow anyplace else in the states. But as I've interviewed a lot of farmers and friends that are in California, that concept, and you brought the word up a bit ago, was adaptive. You know, they became adaptive. And because we tend to think that, oh, all this industrial farming is all completely bad or whatever, but because there's a drought, which may or may not have been partially caused by agriculture processes, but we're going to go through in the world geologic changes no matter what. At some point, we will go into a climate catastrophe. But the
Yeah.
idea is that California's been hit with the droughts, and farmers have adapted, right? So between irrigation systems, but also crop selections, crop rotations, cover crops, they've learned quite a bit. One of my friends who's farming about 10,000 acres over there has gone into putting cyanobacteria through his irrigation system, which is a natural organic, probably the first organism on the planet. And that's how he's getting his biology back. And he told me he's been farming for over 50 years, and he told me that when he got out of farm school, between then and now, he's using about a tenth the amount of water to grow the same vegetables. So you got to say
Wow.
that's a move in the right direction. So I think in all stories that are out there, there's also that positive, and showing those trends is really kind of cool. So, but now you say when you go to the grocery store, one big thing that COVID showed us, right, is that how our system, is it resilient or not? And at first, I didn't realize this, but I read a statistic that 25% of the meals in the U.S. are consumed at a restaurant. Now, when I grew up, we could go to a restaurant like once a year on our birthday. But for some
Right.
reason, well, yeah, right? And for some reason, I was always in trouble, so I never ended up going to the restaurant. I was always around my birthday. I'd be like, oh, I got to try not to get busted at stuff around my birthday. But now it is kind of this thing that everybody, you're going for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and nothing wrong. I'm not saying anything against restaurants, but when COVID happened, restaurants shut down, and there were farmers who were specifically growing for restaurants that also had trouble. And because of that 25% is a lot of food, right? So we
Oh,
saw
yeah.
the milk industry where the dairies were pouring milk out by the millions of gallons. And I knew there were fields in Yuma that were being plowed under that were ready to harvest, but there was no way to distribute them across the food system. Fortunately, in our country, we were able to bounce back probably quicker than others, right? But it is interesting, the setup, because it's truly a public-private partnership that we have in this country. And I'm not going to use those bad words like socialism or whatever, but the reality is that I don't think it's possible to be a farmer without help from the government, if we're trying to feed everyone in the country or everyone on the planet, because you have to have that safety and the safety guides and all that. But the Farm Bureau is part of that, right? So you have extension services from universities, you have the Farm Bureau, you have the USDA. So there's a lot, and I know that a lot of farmers get frustrated because there's a lot of regulation and that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
at the same
Sure.
time, the system works, right? We're all eating. It
We're all
seems.
eating. And we all need,
Yeah.
the farmers need the folks from the urban communities just as much as the urban communities rely on those farmers to provide them the food, provide the restaurants the food. It's just a different way, but it's great. I mentioned earlier I like to connect the dots, and I feel like that's what I do in my job is I connect the dots through agriculture. And if there's one thing that I'm learning, like this kind of common theme from all the farmers, from all the chefs, from everyone in between that I interview, is that they all want to do the right thing.
Sure.
They all want to, whether it's growing cover crop or moving toward more sustainability or regenerative, they're all wanting to do the right thing and wanting to produce a high quality product. Do they produce things because they need the money? Sure, but they also want to make sure they're doing the right thing and providing great food just as much as people want to be able to consume affordable, healthy, fresh food. It really comes full circle. And I think everybody's trying to do right by the planet and right by people, no matter what their method is.
Sure. Well, I think at some point I'll have to go out there to California and
Yeah.
visit some of our test plots that we're doing. Because we've done some work with University of Oregon and UC Davis with this new amazing product, Hemp, which is, I think, going to be woven into the cotton industry. But I'll have to take you to one of our hemp farms um, because it's kind of amazing when you go through. It's like a forest. You can barely see sun coming through when the plant gets 20
Hmm.
feet or better. But what it's kind of amazing is the sound because the bees are so like they love it so much. There's so many bees in there. It sounds like a freight train, you know.
Oh my goodness. Well,
And
we can't forget about those bees.
well,
We
there's a
cannot
crisis.
leave the bees
There's a
out.
big
They're
crisis
very
with
important.
bees, right? So yeah. So
Yeah.
now, if we have a crop that helps the bees repopulate, it's kind of a cool thing. But
Mhm.
we'll have to schedule that trip at some point.
For
This
sure. Yeah. No,
when you
I
have a
would
chance.
love to tag along and see what you're doing with the hemp. And yeah, I think that'd be another great story that people are interested in. And I mentioned you say it's woven in, no pun intended, right?
Right, exactly. Well, it's all natural. I'm a big believer in natural fibers versus synthetics for clothing, for
Hmm.
the clothing industry. And
Yeah.
it's important, I think it's kind of a national interest for us to continue to have our own textile industry. So it's amazing because farmers grow things that, not just that you eat, but things you wear,
Yeah.
paper that you read or write on, and just a tremendous amount of products that come
Oh
out of
yeah,
the
for
earth,
sure.
right? So,
More than just what you eat.
okay, so I'm going to start to wrap up. Let me ask you this:
Okay.
Are you so when you're done with the California Farm Bureau, California Bountiful, which you may never be
Hmm.
done? Maybe you'll do this into your 90s, right? But will you become a farmer? What's next for you in your career? Do you like how do you like this kind of pathway versus some of the other things you've done in journalism?
Well, I have to tell you, Mike, I really am enjoying this role from all aspects, from the producing side, from the hosting side, and even the post production editing and distributing it. I really enjoy it. I kind of feel like I want to do this till the wheels fall off, but we'll
Excellent.
see. I don't. I don't see a shift right now. I think this. I've always in the past worked for TV stations or networks, and it's a little bit of a different being. And that's a whole nother topic. The changing of the broadcast, the
Yeah.
digital landscape.
You're kind of
So I
working
think
for
I'm in a
yourself
good
now,
place,
right?
and I'm doing something where I combine, you know, not only what I've pursued professionally, but then there's so many personal ways that I'm tied into this because it affects me. It affects my children, it affects my friends, my family, and the community at large. So, am I doing something that's earth shattering? No, but do I
Actually, I would
feel
say
proud
yes. I would disagree with you.
Okay, okay, okay,
It
yes,
actually
earth-shattering.
is. Yeah.
I feel
It's
proud to share
literally
this
on the earth that
information.
you're talking about.
Yeah,
Mother
I mean,
Earth.
I feel proud to be doing my part to share messages and again connect dots. And if I learn something new and someone out there learns something new that could be life changing or make a big difference, when it comes to health, nutrition, or just the way they live, then I'm happy to be the person doing it.
So, is California Bountiful something that can be syndicated and seen around the world, or is it around the country, or is it right now in California primarily?
So, well, primarily we partner with broadcast affiliates around the state of California. So if you're in California, you can watch it on your local TV networks, depending on where you live, what time. You go to californiabountiful.com. We have our TV listing, but we also are available on Dish and DirecTV through RFD TV, and
Okay.
that's a long time partnership we've had with them. And then, of course, like everybody else, everything ends up on YouTube. So we have a
Yeah.
YouTube channel where after it airs on broadcast, you can see all our shows and segments. And then we are working on now moving towards like these streaming models, and that I think will help us be more worldwide. Again, we are California, but I like to brag, California not only feeds the US, we feed the world in a lot of ways.
Sure.
So
It's one
I'm
of the
very proud of
places on
that.
the planet that is
Yeah.
primed for agriculture, right? If you think about especially innovative agriculture, it's maybe Israel, right? And then it's
Yeah.
California, maybe it's
Mhm.
Amsterdam, and that kind of, but and it is kind of interesting. So for your listeners or for people listening to this, they can engage in a lot of different ways, and we'll
Right.
post them on this as well, so
Yeah,
people can
California
tune in and
Bountiful, I
see it.
think if you just search it up, you'll find us in one form or
Okay.
another.
All right. Well, I appreciate my guest today, Aubrey Aquino, and look forward to actually watching more of your episodes. And hopefully,
Yes.
you and I will meet up in California and we'll look at some other projects that we work on as well over there.
I would love that. And, I have yet to do a hemp story, so maybe you'll be the first one.
Perfect. It's the new great crop. It's going to save the planet.
Awesome. Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks again, and have a great rest of your day, and we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You guys take care.
Okay. Bye bye. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing, insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.